Hi, guys. Welcome to Queen's Concussion Awareness Committee's 7th podcast. We're here today with Claire Christie from the Varsity Club at Queen's. And so today we're going to be doing a little collaboration podcast where we're going to be going over each of our podcasts, kind of a little bit about concussions in general, and then we're going to be going over our personal experiences with concussions. So to start, I'll just get Claire, just kind of go over what your club's all about, and just kind of give some insight to what you guys do.
Yeah. So as Zach said, I'm Claire. I am on the Varsity Leadership Council as the social media vice president. And the Varsity Leadership Council is a really awesome group of people that have come together to represent the varsity community at Queen's. So we represent all of the teams and all of the clubs at Queen's. So quite a diverse group of students in terms of coming from all different faculties, all different sports. We meet about once a month to plan and run different events for student athletes in the community, as well as acting as a liaison between athletics and the actual students. We actually just hosted a dodgeball tournament last weekend for student athletes, which was super fun. But most of our club, as I said, comes together just to bring student athletes together and keep everyone informed on what's going on and how we can best support one another.
And so, do you guys actually go around to the different teams and kind of speak with them about concussions or resources and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have mandatory student athlete training at the beginning of the year, and regardless of how many years you've been a student athlete at Queen's, you have to complete this, and that includes a segment about Rowan's Law, which I'm sure you're both very familiar with, and does talk about concussions and kind of the protocol for getting back in and into sport after a concussion. There isn't so much a focus from our end on the training and understanding, like training students to better understand concussions and the kind of the severity of them. But there is a recently created concussion awareness module by athletics, which we all have to participate in.
Yeah, great. So you're saying you guys are kind of in charge of setting up different initiatives with all the teams. Did you want to speak just on a couple of those that you guys have completed?
Yeah, for sure. So I was talking a little bit earlier about our dodgeball tournament. That was really fun. We had the second annual varsity dodgeball tournament, and it's kind of a great way to take people out of the sports that they're really, really good at into something that's new. The artistic swimming team does not have great hand-eye coordination, and so my team won not a single game for the past 2 years. We had fun.
Yeah,
Um,
that matters, right?
yeah, exactly. It's so much fun. And I think for me, it's just about bringing people together. And then the other big event that we run is a food donation for Martha's Table in December. So this is my second year on the council, and we ran it last year and this year as well. Last year, we actually had like record-breaking number of donations. We donated over 1,000 canned goods to Martha's Table, which is a food
Awesome.
bank in Kingston.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome. It's a super fun place.
Okay. And Vince, if you want to kind of go over what our club does, kind of give the viewers a little bit more of like different inlets or subcommittees we have.
Yeah, sounds good. So Zach and I are part of QCAC here at Queen's. That's the Queen's Concussion Awareness Committee. And so what we do is we set up different initiatives and just try and create awareness for concussions around campus in the Kingston community. Ultimately, just to promote safe sport, safe return to play, and just kind of break some of those barriers when some people don't know about resources to concussions, or if they just kind of have a lack of education from it. So we're just trying to break some of those barriers down to create awareness around campus. So we have different committees. Zach and I are part of the podcast team, creating awareness this way. We've got different marketing teams. We have our mentorship program, as well as our team of general members, just trying to create kind of that voice on campus. And we also hold a big event coming up here in March where we're going to have some great content, some speakers, and we're just going to be able to hear from different people's points of view and just learn throughout the day. So it should be great.
That's awesome. Vince, you mentioned a mentorship program. What does that mean? Or what is that?
Yeah, so the mentorship program is where we get individuals who have had concussions in the past, just want to be a peer mentor for those people going through it or just to learn about it. just to kind of have that friend or voice, someone to talk to relate to going through similar situations and stuff like that, just so they're not feeling alone.
Yeah, it's mainly because, like Claire, and a lot of our podcasts are just people we've talked to with concussions. A lot of the time, they're just kind of almost lonely and they feel isolated. So we found if you're able to have that common ground of having a concussion or some similar traumatic brain injury, we have those individuals now become mentors for people that are currently experiencing concussions or still recovering from them long term. And we find great results from it, that they've actually found great connections and helped like with just giving insight into like what works for them and just different small tidbits that have helped them just to provide more help with those going through the concussion recovery process.
That's really interesting. For some reason I'm just remembering something in second year. I remember, I don't know if either of you were involved in the club 2 years ago when you had a doctor, I believe, from U of T who was a speaker and he came in. I'm not sure if you remember.
Yeah, Charles Tater.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I went to that talk and I remember just, even though I'd had a concussion, just I had no idea about so much of what actually that meant and what the long-term effects were and how it kind of like the greater effects on the world. And I kind of unrelated, but it was so interesting. And I think that plug to the speakers in the future. I don't know who your next speakers are, but the speaker was really interesting and anybody who's interested should go listen.
Yeah, he was really cool. Like, cause he's like fairly renowned in the concussion like world. So he was great to have on. Yeah, because it was our conference that we had him with.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're getting some high-end speakers to come to this year's conference.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. That's really cool. And he works at the concussion clinic at U of T, correct?
Yeah, like I think he does some in-clinic work, but I think it's mainly research-based.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, that was awesome. I love doing that. And so definitely I'll be back to the speakers this year.
And to get more like into concussions, Claire, do you know, like, can you just give the viewers kind of a definition and kind of the general gist of what a concussion is?
Yeah, I'm going to do my very best. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But in my mind, I remember having to watch this video in high school about concussions, and the like image of it has stuck in my brain, I guess, kind of a metaphor, but also like it's the idea that like your skull like hits into something and your brain on the inside then like hits the wall of your skull and then creates like, in my mind, a bruise or like something like that, some kind of like your brain moving around in your skull and hitting it in various places. I don't know if that's the most in-depth answer, but I think that's the best way that I understand it right now. So even like with a helmet, it doesn't stop the concussion from happening, it just means the impact is less.
Yeah, like so on that. So like I feel like that's a great way to kind of explain visually what actually happens. But we found now that it's more and like it's less structural damage, like as like a bruise per se, and it's more like functional. So it's like a mild traumatic brain injury, which is a little bit different than concussion. That's more on the structural side of it because you're kind of looking at more of a structural aspect of the injury. But a concussion, like just per se, the definition of it is more of like function related, but it all like ultimately does stem from neuropathological like changes within the brain structure. But right now, like the definition for it is a transient disturbance in brain function. But I would totally agree that's a great representation of kind of like what it kind of just visually looks like.
That's really interesting. And like I think that as soon as we started this, I actually had the realization that even though I've had my fair share of concussions, I have so little information even now with the implementation of all the mandatory training because of Rowan's Law. I still don't like, even what you were saying, like I was like, oh yeah, this is I think what it is, and I had no idea like what you just said right now was there was a difference, or that there's been, I guess I know that it's a growing field of study for a lot of people, but it seems like it's changing so quickly too, and it's so crazy that concussions are so common, but there's so little awareness student wide. So it's awesome that you guys are doing this to kind of spread more awareness.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like at this point too, it's just such a growing field, even when you're looking at professional sports and stuff like that. We're looking at like past athletes, kind of how that's affected them, different rule changes, and how we want to implement things just to prevent any of those worst injuries happening in the future now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was actually listening to a different podcast over the break that was talking about I can't remember what it's called, but the long-term brain injury you get when you have like a bunch of concussions, or especially a lot of football players in the States. Is it TBI? Is that what it's called maybe?
CTE?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how just even with like one or two concussions with their kids playing like football when they were in middle school, it had like drastic effects on their personality for the rest of their life. And I think that that is something, as you said, like the field is changing so much, and there's so much new information, so many new information. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. And like on that point of how like once you start to add up these concussions, I like recently was just doing some research with concussions, and it was showing that like now it's if you have a like a concussion, you're at like almost a five-fold increase in getting another concussion while
yeah,
continuing to play that sport. So it's like you're so much more susceptible to getting concussions once you originally get your concussion. Just emphasizing like you really have to be cautious about playing contact sports, especially football or hockey or rugby,
mhm,
where concussions are like fairly prominent.
pretty prominent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So other than we've talked about the mentorship program, like what other resources are there for students on campus once they get a concussion? Or do you know?
Yeah, so yeah, there's a few other resources we've got. There's the QCAC helpline. So that's just a resource for people who've recently had a concussion, looking at long-term effects and just someone to get support from. There's different therapy groups here, workbooks and workshops. Queens has their student accessibility services. So they have accommodations for people with concussions there as well. Of course, there's the Q Sports Medicine Clinic.
Mhm.
Always a great spot to reach out to for a bunch of healthcare needs, but especially with concussions as well. And looking into the Kingston community as well, there's Hotel Dia. So that's the non-emergent care. Um, yeah, in the community as well, there's the Concussion Legacy Foundation and Providence Care Brain Injury Clinic as well. So yeah, just around Queens and the community as well, there's tons of different resources. And ultimately, with kind of our platform and awareness, we just want to make sure that people can be aware of those resources and are never feeling isolated with concussions.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that feeling of isolation is so prevalent. I remember when I had my worst concussion, I was like out of school and out of practice for 6 weeks before I was able to do anything again. And like I think I stared at the birds for actually every day of those 6 weeks, and it is so isolating to be sitting there and being like I'm the only one, like there is no one else. So I think it's awesome that you're spreading that awareness of the different options and the ways to connect people so it's not
And
so lonely.
Blair, when you had your concussion, I know we'll get into it later on, but were you at Queens? Like, were you able to kind of use any of these resources or no?
No, so actually all three of my concussions I've had were between the ages of 12 and 16. Um, so yeah, I was I was hitting like one a year for like almost for in these 4 years, which
So
not so
unlucky.
great for brain development.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so no, I was training pretty heavily though. I was in a like high performer athlete program where I swam for 4 hours a day and then I went to school for three. So there was like a lot of support systems in place. So actually, like the U of T, like concussion clinic was the place that we went to when things like this happened. So it was definitely not like we were alone, but at the same time, like as we've said multiple times now, it's such a growing body of research. And at that point, even 5 years ago, it was like more like a I remember going into the clinic and them saying, like, do you feel like yourself again? Like, do you feel like yourself? And once you feel like yourself, you're fine. And like that was such a crazy thought to me of being like, obviously we'd done all these like benchmark tests to make sure things were going the way that they should be going. But the like last question was like, if your personality doesn't feel the way that it did before you got a concussion, like you're not fully healed and you can't return to sport. But yeah, there was definitely supports in place, but often there was only one person who had a concussion at a time, thankfully. But so there wasn't as much connection between athletes. But yeah, definitely some supports.
And just like touching on like your process through it, do you want to kind of go over like the return to play protocol?
Yeah. So I am familiar with the Queen's return to play, but never experienced it, and so I'll talk a little bit about my return to sport. So my first concussion happened when I was 12 and I got kicked in the head underwater. And I was out only for about a week. And then it was like a go to my doctor, kind of create a basic plan that just looked like if you can get in the water and your head doesn't hurt, you can stay in there for 20 minutes and then you get out. And then the next day is like get a flutterboard and start kicking. And if that doesn't hurt, you get to like progress day to day. And then my second concussion was actually at summer camp. We were playing chicken. I don't know if you've ever played that game where you like on each other's shoulders in the lake, and I was on the bottom and I just like smashed heads with the person who was on the top of the other person, and that was pretty bad. And like in the same way that the plan was created to be like, if you can do this, then you can keep going. But because at that point, like it was the summer and not so much a return to sport, it was a lot lower stakes because it didn't have to be immediately getting back into the pool. And then yeah, the third one was a bit more intense. So I was did a front flip off a diving board at our diving practice, and I actually just landed on the diving board. Like I didn't jump out. And so that was definitely an experience where I realized that like it could have been a lot worse than it was. It could have been a spinal cord injury and it could have been a much more serious head injury. And so I was actually really lucky. And so that return to sport process took a lot longer. I think I was, yeah, as I said, I was out for about 6 weeks doing like literally nothing. I think I slept for like 18 hours a day and stared at the ceiling. Like there was not a whole lot going on. And now we know that, yeah, sorry.
And sorry for that. Like, were any of these, were you like like prescribed, or did the doctor recommend like staying in like a dark room?
Yeah,
Or
actually.
oh really?
Yeah, so I think that I went to the concussion clinic pretty much right when it happened, and then it was just like take your time, like rest. It wasn't so much a prescribed plan, but definitely it was like a you need to be doing nothing, like you need to be sitting here. Um, and I know even from that, like the information has changed on what exactly we should be doing.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, I literally just like slept for 18 hours, which looking back, not the best course of action.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's just like the whole growing body of research with concussions. Like, it just keeps on changing.
Yeah.
So it's definitely no one's fault. It's just it constantly changes, and we're just trying to get better as we live and learn.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's so subjective too. Like the way that my brain reacts to something like that is so different than the way that somebody else is in how like long term the effects are or what the recovery process needs to look like. But yeah, and then it was like the same. So slowly and surely back into the pool, and kind of the end of that season was the end of my grade 9 year. And I decided that I just needed to stop swimming for a little bit. So
Yeah, definitely, because like everyone's going to have their own pace that they're going to heal at, and so that's definitely important. And so you'd mentioned, I think it was your second one was at summer camp.
yeah.
So the other two, were they during your school year?
Yeah. Yeah, they were both at practice. So
Okay.
yeah.
And so, and did you have much time off school, or like how did your recovery process there kind of affect schooling at that point for you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was in like a high performance athlete program, so they were pretty well equipped with dealing with sports related injuries. We There was like a bunch of different sports, like there was hockey players, gymnasts, like swimmers, a bunch of different stuff. So as I said, they had the facilities to be able to kind of deal with injuries like this. For the one where I was in grade 6, I really just walked around with sunglasses for like 3 days, and then I was like, man, it's fine, I'll be fine, and kind of went back to school. Like not much really happened. But the one in grade 9 was more significant because I was out of school for a long time. I think I got the concussion at the beginning of January. And so I missed kind of the end of first semester, that exam season in the first semester of grade 9, all the final assessments. And at that time, all of the teachers kind of just decided that I had done enough, that they were just going to kind of waive everything else and move me along, which was really lucky because I mean, looking back on it, they could have easily been like, actually, you're missing a month of school. Like you have to redo this. And I think obviously that would have changed the trajectory of like my academic career.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's good they can accommodate you, because like just looking at like the return to learn stage with concussions, like you want to go from having like your 24, 48 hours of rest then moving into like light mental activity and then maybe some part-time school. But like with that part-time school is like no tests, no homework. And then kind of gradually increasing with breaks and having an area with quiet space, and then kind of gradually moving back into your full-time school. So it is definitely good for you at that point, like with exams and stuff. They were able to accommodate that because that's definitely important in the recovery process.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sorry. I feel like I've really been talking about my concussion history. I feel like I'm also like learning so much. The more that I say, the more that I realize that I actually don't know as much as I thought I did. So is this return to learn and return to sport protocol like Ontario mandated now, or is it just a set of guidelines for people who have concussions?
Yeah, it's more of a set of guidelines.
Okay.
But I mean, you're right, as in like everyone is unique to the process and like it can be affecting different systems in your body. So like they're all kind of a little bit different depending on who you're with, but like the general protocol is yeah, it's set here for like the guideline. And like that's why I was finding it funny how like for your return to sport, how like a lot of it was like you would rest and sit and sleep.
Yeah.
Because like now we're wanting to get physical activity as quick as we can.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like as Vince was saying, he said like 48 hours is the max you want to ever rest.
Wow.
And that's similar to the return to play protocol right now, where you're like looking to be like resting, just taking it easy, drinking lots of water, eating all the normal functions, just trying to take it easy for 24, but a max of 48 hours. And then once your symptoms like kind of begin to die down a bit or just be stagnant instead of actually progressing, that's when you want to start getting into some physical activity, just being like 5-minute walks and just seeing if that aggravates your headache or any other symptoms. But if it doesn't, trying to progress that to just like longer walks. And that's kind of the first stage. And then you'll get into more heavy or more lighter, but still not anything crazy physical activity, such as like stationary biking, swimming, just going for faster or longer walks. And for all these stages, you just want to make sure you're not aggravating any symptoms, making them worse. You kind of just want to make sure you're either staying the same or getting better, hopefully. And then you're eventually progressing into more sports specific exercises, such as if you're on the hockey team, like skating on the rink, not actually doing the practices, especially not contact, but you're still going on the ice, doing some skating reps, or swimming, getting in the pool, doing some lengths, or soccer, just doing some runs around the field, track, just different sports specific exercises. And then you're eventually going into like the actual practices, still non-contact, but you're actually getting to the full intensity, trying to get your heart rate up, doing resistance exercises, stuff like that. And then finally, if all of that feels fine, doing a full practice with no aggravation of any headaches or symptoms, then you're able to get the clearance from a doctor to go into contact sports, but you have to get clearance for that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the gist of what the protocol is now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how much things have changed, and even like now I'm like thinking of how I just sat for 6 weeks and how that is so not at all the thing as of what we know right now at all what you should be doing. So how quickly is the turnover now of research? Like, is it pretty like month to month there's new information on this, or like what does it look like for the academic sphere?
The like so I mean, like I guess it is like I guess month to month, but like the consensus for like it's like a concussion consensus usually happens every 2 years.
Okay.
But like these return to play and return to learn, I think, have been out for like a few, like 4 years maybe.
Yeah.
But you're totally like it is changing constantly. Like even my athletes that I'm working with now as a student athletic therapist, like they're still under the impression that they should be sitting in a dark room after concussion.
Yeah.
And like that's why I asked you if you were, because it's funny because when I had my concussion, I also was instructed to do this. But now they're realizing like if you sit in a dark room for X amount of time, you're actually like prolonging your recovery and making it actually worse on yourself to return to your sport or academics or whatever it may be.
Wow. That's crazy. And I'm sure it has not from any of my scientific background, but my assumption would be that then there's ties to like the longer you wait physically to get back into your sport, the harder that is as well. So then it becomes a mental and physical game, which is even more challenging than what it would have been if you were able to just start walking or do anything right away.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's definitely half of the healing process is you have the physical and mental side of things. and that's kind of tying back into the whole like isolation thing, and when you're having a concussion, like that's such a battle. So yeah.
Yeah. So is there any ways we can prevent concussions in sport, or what does that like prevention look like?
Yeah, so definitely with prevention, again, it's just awareness, just trying to spread education around concussions. So just learning signs and symptoms of concussions, as well as just kind of taking precaution with all like safety measures you can with helmets and equipment and stuff. Kind of growing up playing sports, we want to prevent any possibility of second impact syndrome happening, which is when you're not fully healed, and then you take another traumatic injury. So yeah, and I was actually reading something the other day. I think it was some of the United States women's soccer players. It was a program for soccer players growing up. It was like they weren't allowed to head the ball until 10 years old, and some regulations around like 11, 12-year olds just minimizing heading the balls. Because obviously that's a huge part of soccer, but just trying to limit that as a kid, just obviously for safety and stuff. But I think ultimately it's just kind of education and awareness, and just the more people that know, then just hopefully the less chance of concussions happening will happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think it's interesting that it's kind of just happening more recently with soccer and the like heading the ball, but we've seen it for so long in like young hockey programs with the stop signs on the back of the jerseys and the no contact. Like I wonder what's caused it to take longer to kind of disperse out into other sports.
Yeah, I think, well, honestly, I like just off the top of my head for soccer, because most of these like just constant headers are like subconcussive impacts. I know you can obviously get the large one where soccer players do get concussions,
Yeah.
but I know like some research from here actually at Queen's, they looked at military snipers and just like the repercussion from the actual gun on their shoulder,
Wow.
rating down to their or into their head caused these subconcussive impacts.
Yeah.
And it actually showed long term that they actually had damage to their brain. They had not CTE, but similar signs of CTE, having like the tau protein, like buildup of that. So I think maybe that's why, because heading the ball isn't like overtly like automatically get a concussion, but you're getting subconcussive impacts. So maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Whereas hockey's a lot more like it just looks worse. But yeah, I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
And Claire, I know you're talking a little bit about just like spreading the awareness. How do you find like just people nowadays can promote or promote awareness about concussions around campus?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even just from the amount I've learned from the two of you over the past half an hour, I think that a lot more needs to be implemented into this student athlete training modules. I think there's so much information that's missing. Like they gloss over it and they say like, "Oh, like there is a return to sport. Like if you get a concussion, go to the doctor." But there's no like, "Oh, here's a little like heads up on what you should be doing or what you need to be thinking about." Because in case this does happen, that you're not actually supposed to sit in a dark room for 3 days and then go to the doctor and then see how things are going. I think that one of the biggest things for me would be seeing if we can implement some of your club's resources into the athlete training at the beginning of the year and kind of just create a better understanding of what prevention looks like, and then once people get concussions, what does recovery look like. As for like the general Queens population, I think it's harder. I think that if you don't grow up in a sport background, you know even less than I do about concussions, and that's a challenge. So I think that spreading information through events and social media and flyers around campus, just kind of promoting information is the best way to combat mis and disinformation about concussions. But it is quite challenging when you're not introduced to any kind of information at all until you get a concussion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. That like a lot of the, especially, I'm just working with a lot of the athlete population here at Queens, and it's funny how even like this population that has been immersed in such a like where concussions are the most prevalent, they still don't know that much, and there's
Yeah.
still a lot of like almost myths they believe, such as black room.
Mhm.
So I'd agree that like we should almost have like a crash course where they learn about just like the big topics about concussions, like second impact syndrome,
Yeah.
myths, return to play, just a quick overview so that they do kind of have a general background knowledge on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think getting involved with athletics would be a great way, and I don't know what that looks like, but I trying to figure out how we actually put this into practice for next season would be great because so much information out there.
For sure.
Yeah. So Zach, you said you work with a lot of athletes in the athletic therapy. Do you work with concussion specifically, or do you just do the AT stuff generally?
Yeah, so like as a student trainer, like you're still like yeah, I guess it's not really specific to concussions. You're kind of going with any injury, but I'm with the men's hockey team specifically,
Okay.
and just because hockey has such a like it's just so known for concussions,
Mhm.
I do have to be pretty well versed in the concussion protocol, and like we do have a lot of concussions throughout the season, but
Mhm.
there's still a lot of other injuries that I'll have to deal with, but we do have to deal with a lot of concussions.
Yeah, so how many concussions, like on average, would you say that the men's hockey team has per season?
So like the couple years that I've been with the hockey team, I would say on average we've had about like 6 concussions per year. But honestly, it kind of depends on the different athletes that come in, especially if we have a larger team or a smaller team, the different opponents are playing. But I was actually talking to the head manager at the clinic, and he was saying he probably has about 4 concussions a week.
Wow.
So like he'll like most likely see like upward of 100 concussions per year.
Yeah.
Now that's not just within the athletic population; it's also with just the general Kingston population.
Okay.
But still, and like and that being said, with ever like with your how you're saying that people still don't know all like the stuff about concussions, like I'm sure there's higher prevalence of that. It's just like they aren't coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure, and then the idea too that if you could just sleep it off, like, oh, my head hurts, but like, meh, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, that's crazy. I think I didn't know there was that many, and I mean, it totally makes sense that we're a large group of people, and a lot of things happen. But yeah, I did not know there were so many, and especially like the case specific men's hockey team. Like, I didn't expect there to be six of them at least per year. So that's crazy.
And I know Claire, you're kind of talking about your actual like recovery process. Um, but how was it like actually coming back and doing more your like leisurely and your functional daily activities per day?
I remember it was really hard. Um, I think that I grew up as a high performer athlete, and up until that point, I hadn't taken more than like 3 weeks off of sport for as long as I can remember. And so just the process of actually having to full stop for 6 weeks was really hard. And then starting to come back and realize I don't feel the same. Like none of the things that I'm doing like feel the same because it's been so long. And even going to school, like the day to day, like walking to school, like taking the bus home, like the social aspect of everything that was going on
Mm-hmm.
was so challenging. Um, and then back to I remember like what the sports doctor said at the concussion clinic of like the last step is like once you feel like yourself, and like until you can say that definitely, like you're not recovered. And I think that that just like solidified it for me. Was like there was, after all of like the headaches had stopped and all of like the other symptoms had stopped, it took me, I would say, like an extra 2 or 3 weeks to like definitively be like, yes, I'm back, like I'm back to who I was, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to complete these tasks. um yeah, so like the day to day was hard. Like even I remember like walking around the block was like, wow, this is like I'm exhausted. Like this is as much energy as I can exude for a lot of my recovery time. But yeah, the social aspect was the biggest part for me, which was challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And like especially just with athletes and like you were saying, like that was the first time you went 3 weeks without it. Like that's such a huge part in your day. It's just so
Hmm.
like ingrained into you that that's your routine. And so like that's a huge part that people look forward to every day. So just like that huge change that just comes with so many mental blocks moving forward.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, and like that's the whole thing with kind of recovering at your own pace, like just walk around the block. Like if that's all the energy that you can put out, then that's that. But like just kind of slow steps getting back into it, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I even realized when I was doing it, like the gravity of the situation. Like it was a pretty major, major deal, and I went from like training 25 hours a week to like sitting on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, looking back, there's so much that I think I would have changed even with the information now, or like the given myself like more space to just like progress at my own speed. But yeah, no, it was a crazy time to say the least. um so have both of you had concussions before as well then?
I have not actually. No, this is my first year with the club, but part of the reason is just being around some friends, family, or teammates in the past that have had them, and it was just kind of an area I thought I lacked some knowledge in,
Hmm.
but kind of just as it is been so common in sports, a growing field, like it's just something that I wanted to be a part of, just kind of education wise. I haven't experienced one myself, but I definitely just wanted to be more versed in it moving forward.
Yeah, sure.
I had one when I want to say it would have been grade 10. I was playing a hockey game. It was like just a classic play where forward dumps it in. It's called offside.
Hmm.
So whistle was blown, play was dead, and
Hmm.
I was just gathering the puck to give to the ref, and then all I see turn around, and then I kind of blank at this point. Like I don't actually remember this specific instant, but from my like parents there in the stands, the player actually charged after me after the whistle and hit me from behind, and then my head. I was kind of about 4 feet away from the boards, so my head hit like the edge between the boards and the glass,
Hmm.
that little ledge, and then I was on the ice for like a good like 10 seconds, not moving, and I eventually got up and skated back to the bench, a little bit wobbly,
Hmm.
and I kind of just sat on the bench. I was like, "Coach, I just need a minute here. Just like give me a break." And like at this point, there wasn't too much coach training or any like education provided to the coaching system,
Hmm.
so they didn't really know like to like pull me from play like how it is now.
Yeah.
So I like after a few minutes on the bench, just like catching my breath, I actually went back into the lineup and went back onto the ice. As soon as I stepped onto the ice, I was trying to concentrate on the puck, and I just couldn't see the puck. I could
Hmm.
see everyone skating, and it looked like they were passing it. I just couldn't see the puck,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Well, this is obviously something's wrong." So I like changed right away, and then I went to the dressing room. And then when I went to the dressing room, as soon as I sat down, I like just lost vision. I
Wow.
went blind for about 2 minutes, and like this was by far the scariest moment I've had in my entire life.
Yeah.
Like this was like crazy. I was thinking I'm gonna lose vision for the rest of my life. My life's gonna change. It was just so traumatic.
Hmm.
And then thankfully, like 2 minutes later, like I could start to actually see like some fuzzy figures. And I realized my parents in the room, they're freaking out, coach is freaking out. And it was just a really traumatic situation where I was like, well, this is like really bad.
Hmm.
But then eventually, so I went to the doctor. They diagnosed me with a concussion, and then I was kind of. And at this point, they were still like saying dark rooms are like the first thing to do when you're in this protocol.
Hmm.
So I went to a dark room, sat in there for like the next 3 days. Still felt droggy and just terrible. And I just like going for walks. So I eventually just went out for walks, and I think that's like what started to make me feel better, which
Hmm.
is crazy now because now like that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what started me making me feel better. And then, but I didn't get back to playing hockey till like the next season, which was just really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah, that was
Wow,
my story.
that's incredibly scary. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And that's so makes so much sense then why you've dedicated your time here at Queens to be part of the Queens Concussion Awareness group. And I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Well, like, exactly. Honestly, like it's obviously a very like traumatic story, like when I'm telling it.
Hmm.
But like looking back at it now, like it showed me and like allows me to like find common ground with those actually experiencing concussions,
Hmm.
especially within the healthcare field. That's what I want to pursue the rest of my life in. Like it
Hmm.
allows me to kind of get a better understanding of what they're going through and like how to actually like provide them with help and just get more trust and common ground with our relationships, just to provide better care. So honestly, like, bad situation, but I think I've learned a lot from it, and but yeah, you're right. I've kind of dedicated a lot of my life now to like learning more about concussions and helping others with concussions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, Claire, do you have any like last kind of thoughts or anything else to say?
I don't think so. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This has been super fun, and I think again, like I'm actually very I say actually like I wasn't before, but I'm dedicated to getting some of your concussion information into this athletics training, because I think that would be a great avenue for
It'd be
more.
great. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Claire.
Of course. Best of luck with the rest of your semesters.
Yes, you as well. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Claire. That was great speaking with you, because I think you offer some great insight into like what the concussion process was like back then. I think it was great chatting with you, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do some more collaboration, maybe helping with a varsity club, spreading education, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome. Even like if you wanted to host a like information night based on what your club does, and that you're a resource, because I didn't even know that you did as many things as you do. And so I feel like probably a lot of student athletes don't know all of the things that you do. So it'd be awesome if you wanted to maybe host a night or something like that, where people could drop in and learn about resources you guys have.
For sure. Yeah, it'd be great.
Well, that's really it here. Thanks for everyone that tuned in and listened on. And hopefully we can catch you next time. But thanks for listening.